right, joined now by Wes Golberg. He's a host of Locked On Heat as well as for the Locked On NBA Podcast Network. Uh, Wes, thank you so much for taking the time, man. Let's talk about Miami. This has been an interesting time for Miami. Just you lose Tyler Herro relatively early on in the year, but the Heat just keep on trucking. There's a lot to kind of get into with the crevices of this team, but what do you think is the biggest kind of maybe macro difference between last year and this year so far?
I actually think this team is deeper than the team that made the finals last year. This is a team that now has real options for the starting lineup. Remember last year, they were starting Caleb Martin as an undersized power forward for most of the season. This year, they have Haywood Highsmith as a power forward. He's a little bit longer, a little bit more of a power forward body there. Makes a little bit more sense at that position. Caleb Martin, who was injured for the start of the season, now healthy, playing really well off the bench, which is the role that Spo wants to use him in. You add that to guys like Kevin Love being here for the entire season, not just after the buyout market. You've got a rookie like Jaime Jaquez Jr. making an impact early on, and I'm sure we'll talk about him later in the show. And then you combine that with, sort of a bounce back season for Duncan Robinson, better play at the backup center spot, whether it's Orlando Robinson or somebody else. Kevin Love has been used as that backup center quite a bit recently. I think this team is the addition of Josh Richardson. I think this team is just deeper than the one last year. Last year's team was not very good. Last year's team had to go into the play-in tournament in order to make the playoffs. And so I think this team is starting to trend in a direction where hopefully that's not going to be the case, that they can get one of those top 6 seeds in the Eastern Conference. Whether or not this team makes a finals run, who knows? That kind of depends on a whole other bunch of factors. But I do think that this team is just flatly deeper than the one last year.
It's interesting to think about it that way because when you lose a couple guys in the offseason and Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, guys who were important to the team last year, and I think a lot of people, myself included, thought, okay, this is probably going to hurt them, especially during the regular season where you just need to build in rotation minutes for guys that you trust. But it just seems like they keep getting away with it, man. We got to talk about Jaime Jaquez Jr. That is one of the biggest stories of, I think, maybe the NBA season so far. Tell me about Jaime Jaquez Jr. Tell the world about Jaime Jaquez and what he has brought as a rookie to the Heat.
Well, it's funny because in training camp, you talk to players and coaches, and they would throw around a cliche that you and I have heard a lot, kind of talking with people. It's, oh, he's a veteran, he's not really a rookie, he's a veteran. And you're like, okay, you just sort of as a reporter kind of roll your eyes. You're like, all right, I've heard that before. But then you see him play and you're like, oh, wait, no, I get it. Like how this guy plays is so under control. It is so measured. It is so tactful. Like he knows exactly who he is as a rookie. I feel like a lot of players, it takes them years to kind of find their voice in the NBA. And for Jaime, he's just walked in and he's like, these are the things that I do really well. I could play in the post. I eat up space in the paint. I'm gonna take those catch and shoot threes when they're available. I'm gonna rebound. I'm gonna get guys involved. I'm gonna play make. I'm gonna screen for teammates. Like he does all those hustle things, but he can also score. He can also pass. The Heat, within the first week of the season, started running sets for him. Like it'd be one thing, like if it was for another young team, right? Like a young team has to get the ball to somebody, but this is a veteran team. This is a team with Jimmy, Bam Adebayo, Kyle Lowry. Like there's a lot of established guys who have made runs to the finals and Eastern Conference Finals over the last 4 years, and for them to rely on a guy like Jaime, I just think is astounding. I think it's nothing short of shocking. And every time they have given him something more to do, he's taken it, he's run with it, he's aced that pop quiz, and then he's gotten ready for the next one. It's pretty remarkable what they found at the 18th pick.
It really is interesting to think about. Like he is like one of the guys that I think that every playoff team would want as a rookie. Denver had a guy like that last year in Christian Brown, who was immediately able to step into a little bit of a role, but Jaime's even a little bit better than that. Just the way that he's able to assume more responsibility on the team and be like, everybody is very comfortable when he has the ball in his hands. And that's just so rare for a young player on a really good team. It's awesome to see, and he will continue to grow into that role. And I wonder if he's going to maybe upset the pecking order in some ways down the line. That'll be interesting to track. Um, the defense. So just looking at the net ratings and then some of the ratings on cleaning the glass, 20th in net rating, a little bit of a weird one because there's like 20 different teams that have a positive point differential right now. So every team is pretty good. 13th in offense, 18th in defense. Defense kind of falling off a little bit, although it wasn't like anything too special last year. Just into some of the weeds on this. Bottom 5 in rim field goal percentage allowed and bottom 5 in 3-point percentage allowed. What do you think's gone into that? Just kind of on boots on the ground there.
Well, number one, they just played 2 games against the Indiana Pacers, who are breaking records for offense. And so prior to that 2-game little mini series against Indiana, the Heat actually ranked, I believe it was 12th or 13th in defensive rating, if I have it right. So now, after 2 games against the Pacers, they drop quite a bit. That said, when you mentioned kind of going under the hood on some of those stats, those have been troublesome issues for them for most of the season. Specifically at the rim, I could attribute that to Bam Adebayo missing games. He's missed now 5 games because of a hip injury. When he's not in there, they just don't look the same offensively. Jimmy Butler, for the first 4 or 5 games of the season, just wasn't himself on either end of the court. And I know it feels like we've kind of watched a lot of basketball here, but in terms of sample size, we're still dealing with a very small sample, right? And that's evidenced by the fact that you can play 2 games against the Pacers and it just completely throws off your defensive rating. Offensive rating, they're like 11th right now. They're not the 11th best offense in the NBA. You and I both know that. But because they played the Pacers twice in a row, and the Pacers not only are an elite offense themselves, but they make every team look like an elite offense, it throws off their rating. But defensively, I think they're going to be okay. I think they'll be fine. When they're healthy, they have Bam Adebayo, Haywood Highsmith, who might be their 3rd best defender already on the team, Jimmy Butler. When those 3 guys are healthy and going, and in that starting lineup, I don't know that there's any team in the league that looks at Miami's defense and says, yeah, that's going to be easy to score on.
Yeah, I think it's completely fair. I don't see any reason why because the defensive personnel is still really, really good, especially when the starting unit is intact and everybody's kind of in their place and Caleb Martin's then rotating in. I was curious, you mentioned the backup center spot earlier and just how that has improved. I was under the impression that based kind of Thomas Bryant's not really in the rotation anymore, might be kind of mixing and matching different bodies, maybe not necessarily settling on one. That to me seems like a spot that could be concerning, but not really because Bam Adebayo is going to play a bunch of minutes at center in the playoffs. Like, how concerning is that actually?
I'm really not concerned. They've basically settled in now with Kevin Love playing the backup 5. Kevin Love started the season at power forward as a starting power forward. The Heat eventually moved him out, moved Haywood Highsmith into that starting spot, and then that allowed Kevin Love to come in at the bench as that backup center, which is probably what he is at this point in his career. And it actually works nicely because Spoelstra is able to stagger Bam and Jimmy Butler and their minutes, and then he kind of staples Kevin Love's minutes to Jimmy Butler's. And that, of course, makes a lot of sense just intrinsically. Like, okay, pick and pop center with Jimmy Butler, space the floor for him. That makes sense. So I think that's a good addition, a good a spot for Kevin Love to fill. And then recently we've seen Orlando Robinson fill in that starting lineup for Bam Adebayo as Bam's missed games. So he's played well. He had his first career double-double the other night in Toronto. He's a good rebounder. He's a drop defense defender, kind of rim protector, big body. Doesn't do anything flashy. But Thomas Bryant, as that backup center earlier in the season, was a problem, right? Like, he's a guy who, Denver fans know this. He's a little slow-footed, not a guy that you can exactly play in crunch time, not really super reliable defensively. And then if he's not giving you that offensive spark, he's not really bringing much of anything. He's a net negative at the end of the day. Orlando Robinson's just a little bit more steady defensively. So I think it was a little rough to start the year as that backup center spot, as they kind of sorted through their options and toggled through some different lineups. But now that it feels like they've settled on what it's going to be, I actually think it's going to be a strength of theirs because Orlando Robinson's basically their third center, not a guy that has to play every night. But if you do have to call his number, he's shown that he could be a spot rotation guy here and there.
And then with the rest of the rotation, obviously, this is a mix and match kind of team where you've got a lot of guys that are capable of filling a lot of different roles. Kyle Lowry's still going very strong, and that 3-point percentage is pretty crazy just looking at it here. But like we talked about, Jaime Jaquez, is going to give you good minutes. Josh Richardson's going to give you good minutes. There's a lot of guys that I think, as you mentioned, the depth is just way better here, and it allows you to survive in absence from a guy like Tyler Herro. Just can you give us the latest on where Tyler Herro is at in his recovery?
He's out of the walking boot. He's been practicing in non-contact situations. He's been putting up shots at the end of practices when the media is allowed in. You could see his ankle, no bandages, no wraps. Okay, so that's all good signs. Still no timetable for his return. Probably expecting it at some point this month, though.
Yeah, it's good to hear. He is obviously a very, very helpful player and started off the season extremely well, and somebody that I know was at the center of a lot of things when it comes to this offseason and a lot of the discussions that we had about a certain point guard in Milwaukee now. So, is there, like, given the way that the season has gone, is there any FOMO in that side of things, or have Miami Heat fans just kind of moved on?
Miami Heat fans aren't exactly known for moving on, but I don't know that if there's a FOMO, it's that the Heat have been one of the worst fourth quarter teams in the NBA this year. Part of that is because one of their best fourth quarter scorers, Tyler Herro, hasn't been involved for most of the season because of that ankle injury. But the other part of that too is that Damian Lillard has been one of the best clutch scorers in the NBA this season. So you kind of been like, all right, well, we're one of the worst fourth quarter teams. We got maybe the option for us this summer was one of the best fourth quarter scorers. It would have been nice to have that guy here. I don't know, based on what Milwaukee has done so far, that Heat fans are feeling anyway, or the Heat themselves are feeling like that team is much better than us, despite having gotten the guy that we wanted this summer. Now the Bucks are trending in the right direction. Maybe that's something that changes. Maybe that's a sentiment that changes a little bit in the next couple of months. But for now, I don't think that the Heat are afraid of the Bucks. I don't think they're afraid of, honestly, anybody right now in the Eastern Conference. It's not saying that they shouldn't be. I just don't think that they necessarily are, personally. But that's not to say that like there aren't questions about what it looks like when Tyler Herro comes back on this thing, because they got on a little bit of a roll there with Tyler Herro out. Duncan Robinson's played really well in his place. I do wonder if it's something that they explore about whether or not they want to bring Tyler Herro off the bench and leave Duncan Robinson in that starting lineup. I think that's got to be on the table, based on the way that Duncan's played. So if that's the case, what happens with Tyler Herro? He'll come off the bench. He can sort of reprise that sixth man of the year role that he had a couple of years ago. I think that would be helpful. But the question would be, obviously, does Tyler Herro buy into that kind of role? Because he's somebody that wants to start. He wants to make a play for the All-Star team. Like, that's kind of his personal goals. If he's not okay with that, what does that do to that locker room? I think there's a lot of questions in regards to Tyler Herro. The one question I don't have is he was putting up career highs before the injury. He looked really good. He's developed as a scorer. He's really developed as a playmaker. I thought he got better defensively. He was averaging a career high in steals. I think that was really big for Miami, and it kind of fits their formula in terms of what they want to do defensively. He's a really good player. I don't think that there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, and I wonder if there is some doubt on the Portland side of things, just how things have gone for Miami so far this year. It's always we'll just ignore that little detail, because I'm sure a lot of people are, especially Portland fans, are probably tired of hearing it after the way that the trade has gone for them so far. So we will see what happens, but I'm very curious as to how this evolves for Miami. But I'm looking forward to tracking it all with you, Wes. So here's Wes Golberg over at Locked On Heat and Locked On NBA. Make sure to follow all of his work over there. Thank you so much, Wes. Let's check in 6 weeks, all right?
Thanks, man.